Hi everyone, I'm Jillian. I'm a learning advisor with Academic Skills, and I'm going to give you a short refresher on what we covered in week 6 of the tutorial. So, reminding you about the requirements of Essay 2, you do want to choose one of the essay topics that interest you. You've been given a list of 8 broad topics, and under those topics are a list of broad guiding questions, and you'll find that all on Waddle. You want to pick one of those topics, maybe pick one of those guiding questions and narrow it down, or create your own question that would fit under one of those topics. And then you want to develop that argument. You want to answer that question and support your answer to that question, bringing in all that evidence and research that you've done. And then you want to present that in a well-structured argument. So let's remind ourselves of the essay writing process you want to try to be engaging in, where you're finding and developing your argument and spending some time breaking down that question that you created, so that you can really do your research strategically, so that as you're reading and taking notes, you're thinking about, what position am I going to take within this debate? How am I going to answer this question? What are some reasons that are going to help me to answer this question? And all of that will lead you to create that thesis statement. And once you have that thesis statement, your overall answer to the question, you can then begin to structure your essay, create a loose structure around those main points you want to be covering, and then you can make a more detailed essay plan covering all the different paragraphs that you're going to be writing in the body of your essay. And only then do we suggest you go on to actually write your essay, and to really spend that time finding and developing your argument and planning your argument. You'll find will be very helpful to you once you get to that writing your essay stage, and then the editing, and finally submitting your essay. So we do suggest that you follow along with that essay writing process. Many students have found it to be incredibly useful and improved their grades. So let's think about creating the question that you have to create. That's a new and challenging task. It's going to be a very rewarding task, but you might need some guidance in how to create a good essay question if you've not done it before. So you want to be thinking about creating an analytical question. Those tend to start with why or how. Instead of creating a more descriptive question that might start with a what or a where or something like that, that will just allow you to answer in a factual way. You don't want to give just a factual answer that will only allow you to describe something. So you do want to have those why or how questions that will allow you to dig a bit deeper, that will allow you to analyze something, analyze the relationships between ideas, the cause and effect relationships between an event and the effect that might have had on a particular country or group of people. You might make judgments about the significance of something, of a particular event or political situation. Something like that is going to allow you to really put forth a particular argument, again, rather than just describing something. So what's the criteria for a good question? It does have to be broad enough for this scope, and your scope is 2,000 words. But really, the main thing you want to do is to narrow it down, because most students do create a question that is too broad. So really, you want to think about making it narrow enough so that you can have a focused argument, and that you can really comprehensively address that argument, rather than not being able to, because the question itself is so broad. Again, you want it to be analytical, allowing you to really have a critical examination of this question and particular debate. And we suggest that you frame it as a question with a question mark at the end, rather than starting with discuss or describe or examine, which will lead to a full stop at the end. You do want to start with that why or how, so that it's framed as with a question mark at the end, so that when you answer that question in your thesis statement, you can really check how directly you've answered that particular question, and make sure that you've really done that. You've directly answered the question. So let's look at this example question that we think meets this criteria of broad yet narrow and analytical. How do representations of the Nanjing massacre in contemporary China affect current Sino-Japanese cooperation. So we thought that was broad enough because it's talking about the Sino-Japanese cooperation, which seems to be, quite a large cooperation to, engage in, and quite a complex thing. However, narrow enough. We're talking about representations of a particular event, of a massacre. So that would make it kind of narrow and focused enough. And then it is analytical. It's got that how. It's a cause and effect argument. How does one thing affect something else? And so that does allow you to make some critical judgments about that cause and effect, and to put forth that argument about what that cause and effect is, about that relationship between these two things. So that one does meet that criteria. Some other ways that you might want to start your question might be with to what extent, or why, or what kind of impact does this thing have on another thing, or do, as some other ideas for starting out your question. So thinking even more deeply about your question and how you're going to develop it, what topics are you interested in? What kinds of questions could you ask? Will you make one of those broad guiding questions a bit more narrow by inserting specific details, like adding a particular country or a particular time period or particular event? Or will you create your own new question that's related to one of the topics and certainly narrow enough? So that's your choice. And we suggest that you just check in with your tutor to make sure you've got a really good question that you're happy with and that they're happy with, so you can create a really good answer to the question. And finally, I just want to talk to you about your presentations. You have group presentations coming up quickly if you're doing yours in week 7, and maybe some of you have a bit more time. So you have 30 minutes of the tutorial, 10 minutes you're going to be talking about some central critical concepts, 5 minutes you're going to be bringing in a primary source that you found and talking about how it relates to the critical concept, and 15 minutes of class activities and discussion that you have to come up with and lead. And so it is a group presentation. So thinking about everyone contributing, having a speaking role, and everyone participating in the actively and fully in the process. So what are the keys to a good presentation? You want to think about having a clear message about those critical concepts, about the relevance of that primary source that you bring in, and a clear message for the purpose of the activities that you decide to do, and that logical structure that's going to make it really clear to your audience why they're doing what they're doing and how you're presenting information in this logical order. If you have some PowerPoints, that you have some really clear, nice visual aids, and that you do have engaging activities. So you've got to be preparing and practicing together for this professional and stress-free delivery. So please do make the time to come together and make sure that this presentation does seem like a very cohesive, coherent piece of work together. So we have a template on our website, and you may want to have a look at this and download this and fill this in so that you are all clear on your key message and how you're going to be supporting that key message in the different elements of your group presentation. And finally, preparing those group activities. You all want to think together as a group and reflect on other tutorials or this tutorial in ASIA 1030 and the activities that you've enjoyed. What has worked well? What types of questions have you found interesting? And what can you do similarly to engage your audience in these types of interesting questions and interesting activities? And really be explicit and tell the audience why you're doing these activities, what you expect them to get out of these activities. These activities can be just discussion questions that are really interesting. You can also think about role play, or you can think about as well engaging in a group activity in a debate. Okay, so that's all I had to share with you. I hope you wish you the best of luck with your essay and your group presentation.